Hi everyone, and welcome to World IA Day Bristol 2021. We're excited to bring you some great sessions today. So we've got a panel discussing the future of information architecture right now. We have 4 lightning talks a bit later, and then finally a short talk from Dan Klein, followed by a conversation with Nomensa CEO and founder Simon Norris. So World IA Day is an annual celebration of information architecture with 42 events happening all around the world today. We're proud to be hosting one of the 3 UK events here in Bristol, and we hope that next year we can again host the event in person, but for now you can all enjoy the sessions safely from your sofa. This is one of 4 virtual events we're running this year at Nomensa. We also have a brand new accessibility conference coming in April, which we'll be announcing very soon. And of course, our well-known conferences Interact and Collaborate coming up a bit later in the year. We'll be announcing details of those very soon too. So before I introduce our first session, I'd just like to say a big thanks to everyone taking part today, those watching at home, our speakers and panelists, and everyone involved in World IA Day all around the world. We've got a Discord channel for networking. Please do say hello to each other there, and also in the chat here in Zoom. Please ask lots of questions too. We've got a mural board for posting job ads, sketch notes, ideas, anything else visually you'd like to share. And yeah, as I said, we hope you say hello to each other and make some new connections today. So here at Nomensa, we're going through a period of growth and we are hiring. We've lots of vacancies over on nomensa.com, and our head of recruitment, Harry, is here in the Discord chat to answer any questions you may have. So yeah, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first session, a panel on the future of information architecture with some fantastic panelists. We've got Chris Frost of the Met Office, Bushra Saba of Lloyds Banking Group, Hannah Tempest of Nomensa, and Geoffroy Martinez of LivePerson. And this panel is hosted and moderated by Alberta Soranzo of Vodafone. So over to you, Alberta, to kick things off.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Nomensa, for organizing today. It's amazing to be here. I'm on brand, World IA Day. Go to the website if you want to see what's happening in the rest of the world, or you want to catch sessions that may be happening later in UK time. So super excited to start off today, not with a look back, but with a look forward. But before we jump straight into the future, I'm really curious to hear from our panelists how IA fits into the role. What does it mean for them? Because when we think about IA, we think library school, we think categorization, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes it's really hard to make the leap from the theoretical, the science, to what it matters when you're working in an organization. So I'd say ladies first, if everybody is okay. And I'd like to start with Bushra. What does it mean? What is your role at Lloyds Banking Group? And what does architecture mean for you?
Sure, thank you, Alberta. So I am a lead information architect in Lloyds Banking Group, and I look after the security domain. To me, information architecture, I think we need to first start with architecture. So I won't go for the textbook explanation, everyone can Google that. Architecture to me is where people, processes, and technology meet, and data and converting that data into information is at the heart of it. And that's what, in a nutshell, information architecture means to me. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What does your day-to-day look like? How do you apply it in practice?
That's a good question. So on a daily basis, it's a curveball. It can be anything really. It could be looking at projects and initiatives which require a data architecture lens to see how we can enable or meet business goals, or looking at the whole portfolio and what in terms of the strategy would look like, what the roadmap looks like, and how you would use data in that space. So yeah, it's a 360-degree view of data, really.
Yeah, it sounds really complex, but thank you for that, Bushra. Hannah, what does it mean? And you're a practicing information architect. What does it mean to you? How does that work?
Yeah, it's I think it's really, really a bigger thing than many people realize. I'm working with stuff which is kind of doing digital transformation for entire organizations. And the thing that I think I've probably learned most is that if we haven't got this IA right at the beginning, then everything else fails afterwards in a massive cascading kind of way. You know, for me, it's about understanding entities, understanding relationships, and I try and think of IA less in the library sense and more in the kind of organic, growing, moving sense, because actually that's more how organizations operate. They're not static. You don't make a nice bookshelf and everything fits and then you walk away. It's a constant battle or a challenge, depending on your perspective, to kind of pull those things together. So yeah, for me, it's the kind of blueprint of everything else, and it's the first point where you have the opportunity to be successful or be very, very unsuccessful, I would say.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Geoffroy.
Yes.
At the top of my screen, what do you do? What is LivePerson?
So LivePerson is a company that is focused on conversational AI. That means we help brands to transform and interact with their users in a conversational way. So the basic idea behind that is to say that interfacing through website or through screens is something that had to be done at some point in time. But with today's technology, there is a way to have a much more natural interaction with your users through conversations, and that's what we do. And what my role is at LivePerson is work with some of our strategic brands to help them make that step and transform basically their organization into a conversational business.
Right. So how does IA fit into AI? You know, you're just flipping the letters is not
Exactly,
enough, is it?
Yes, it's so at first, actually, I must say the link is maybe not that obvious. If for anything, maybe people busy with IA might be scared that actually AI is coming, because if you remove the website, then what's left to do in terms of organizing the information and putting these menus? Actually, I think it's totally the other way around. Is for AI to be even possible, it starts with a good IA. It's all about organizing information. And I would say, I mean, just to keep it simple for now, it's just like, if you think of AI and what it does, it's basically building an internal representation of information. So these algorithms, the way they work is that through a lot of example, they learn how to understand some human utterances and see through that and understand what the intent of these people is. And fundamentally, this is information architecture, just automated, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. And then Chris, the Met Office. So you're the one who makes the weather, right? For us.
We forecast the weather. We don't make it, but
Shame. I would have loved to order some summer.
Well, you never know. It's sunny today, so hopefully it's a good sign for spring. Yeah. So at the Met Office, I'm the head of consumer digital at the Met Office, and primarily that means that my team deliver the Met Office website and the Met Office app, and information architecture fits in with us. You know, it's hand in glove, because fundamentally it's about helping people find the information that they need as quickly as possible, so they can make good decisions. So, you know, our purpose is very much around keeping people safe, keeping people able to keep on doing their jobs or to travel safely. And so we want them to go and get the information around the weather or particularly warnings as quickly as possible, so they can take action and move forward. So information architecture is a fundamental part of that. So it's building the right structure, it's building the right architecture around our websites and our apps, so that users are able to find stuff. One of the most important things about our website, for example, is that around 95% of our content on our website isn't weather related. It's more about what the Met Office does as an organization. It's about our science, it's about our climate science, it's about our business services. But 95% of our users come to the website for our weather and our warnings. So the way that we structure that, the way that it has been structured in the past, is very much around how the organization sees itself, rather than how users might want to find information. So a lot of the work that we've done over the last 18 months, 2 years, and continue to do, because I also believe that information architecture isn't a one and done thing. It's a continuous thing that you need to work on, is to try to solve some of those issues and try to move the needle towards being more user focused and being more about what people need to find rather than what the organization wants to tell. And that's quite a challenge in an organization that's very scientific.
Thank you, Chris. And then that is something that I'm sure we all recognize to a degree, as how we organize our environments, whether they're physical or digital, is a reflection of culture, history, and all those good things. And so that makes me want to ask Hannah, because she's the only one who's not in-house or client side, as we say here in the UK. How do you help your customers or the organizations you support? You talked about digital transformation and transformation programs earlier. How do you help them make the shift from an organization that's reflective of internal culture to one that is more aligned with what the customers of that organization or the users of that organization might make more sense for? While you answer that question, I'm really curious. I see the list of participants. Could I ask that all that work as information architects or identify as information architects press the raise hand button so we can do a quick count of who's in the chat? And Hannah, if you wouldn't mind taking the question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you went in hard with the biggest question, definitely.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. I think it's all about measurement. I was going to say it's all about evidence, but I don't want to say it's evidence, because you can have evidence and it doesn't go anywhere. It's about measurement, and it's about being able to benchmark things appropriately. If you have a politically organized structure within an organization, measuring certain important things, so not just measuring NPS, which is another talk which I won't get into, like measuring how long for someone to find something, how easily can someone get help. So trying to again phrase those slightly more human tasks as you're benchmarking. Then it's about discovery, it's about understanding and uncovering all of the things that maybe are hidden, and this is important because it's important, this is important because our CEO likes it. Those are different reasons why something might be important. And then I think once you have that kind of view, it's about creating relationships, making models and ways of organizing that information that make sense to humans. So, applying logic, applying structure to all of that information. And then it's about measuring it again and demonstrating impact. Because evidence can kind of happen all over the place of like why you might want to do something one way or another, but without measuring and then showing impact, once we've made changes where we've made things into more human-based structures, then it won't actually hit home to an organization. It's really, really important. If you can say it took, and this is a real one from a client, it used to take 2 hours and someone crying to finish this form, and now they can do it in 10 minutes. That's an impact. So I think that's probably how I would see it. And I think, because I've worked with Chris in his organization, I think probably Chris sees it pretty similarly.
I couldn't agree more. There's loads of things around evidence, and also being a scientific organization. There's things around just terminology, just clear understanding. Hannah talked about how humans understand things. It's true, but we as a scientific organization use terminology which is not understood broadly across the country. And so it's about trying to humanizing that language, as well as structuring it in a way that makes sense to people as they're moving through a site. So yeah, and then trying to find those. It's not always about big things either. I think it's not always about big wins at the end of it. It's about moving the needle in a small way to get that, to move things to a better place, and having a vision for where that better place is, and trying to move there in a kind of structured way. So yeah, couldn't agree more with what Hannah just said.
Totally. What I love to say is that once you help them see the system and how it all hangs together, the organizations can't unsee it, and then you can take action on all those lovely relationships and dependencies and debt. So one of the things that that I think is on everybody's mind is that as we become more digital, as we're able to store, process, serve, surface more information through many different ways, and through many different channels, the risk associated with having this corpus of of private, public pieces of data becomes increases. So how does I'm really curious, how do you think organizing and structuring information and architecting it helps us keep it more secure, or rather helps keeping what matters more secure, what should remain private? And perhaps this is a question that we could start asking Bushra, since this is your domain, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. So you're absolutely right regarding data. It's coming through so many channels, and every day the channels are increasing. So when you say you have a new device, a new IoT device that might come into the market, or there might be a new source that might come in, they may have completely different parameters. So how do you bring all that information and keep it safely, bring it safely in what is relevant? So it's about asking the right questions initially to make sure, first of all, you haven't already got what you're looking for, and then bringing in what you don't have. So again, data, we need to look at the classifications, whether it is public, internal, or confidential, and based on that, you can put the right controls. And I think putting the right controls is the key here. So whether you want to, I'm not going to go into too many technical details like encryption or obfuscation and all that, but I think it's key to bring in the right controls to the right data and store it and use it appropriately. Overall, I think that's the main ask here, really.
Yeah, I think I recognize a lot of the things that you're talking about as important. Now, coming from looking at security from the point of view of someone who does not work in security, but is still responsible for organization information, how does that work for you? So what are your considerations, for instance? And this kind of leads nicely into something else that I wanted to talk about. Geoffroy, when you think about artificial intelligence, and when you think about how it is applied in all these new interfaces that are surfacing, how does that work for your area?
In terms of security specifically, yeah?
In terms of security, but also in terms of the evolution, towards different kinds of interfaces that cannot be represented linearly, like, a navigational path on a website.
Yeah. So let's start with security, or at least I would say, sensitive data handling. That's what I would say, which is a challenge actually with the AI model in different ways, not in the conventional way. But the first thing is, if you have a system that interacts with user autonomously, then you need to teach him how to recognize that sort of information. So it knows it's handling sensitive information. You can do that with patterns in simple ways, but sometimes you need to do it in a bit more sophisticated way. For example, when you look at recognizing addresses in different countries, or recognizing names, social security numbers, you can just programmatically encode everything. for that recognition. Now, the other part of that is everything related to privacy. So, this system, what they do is they learn from this conversation autonomously. So how do you make sure that this information doesn't end up being part of your, reference set of data that's being used for your training phrases? So there are different ways you can tackle this problem, but this is definitely a sensitive area. But to take your question a little bit more broadly, if you think of things, for example, like inclusivity, so making sure that everybody is able to access the information, is able to make use of your systems, that translates also in AI with the problem of bias typically. So how do you make sure that your training sets are good enough that they will not exclude part of the population from making good use or being treated equally? If you think of what you mentioned briefly, discoverability is another big point. If you have an interface, what people see is their entry point and leads them to understand what they can do, cannot do, and how they should formulate their ask. If you think of a conversational interface, you basically have an input box and the system can pick everything. So without even getting into how you handle what they input, how do you make them understand what that agent, that artificial agent they have in front of them is able to do for them? So yeah, there are lots of links between the two, just not handled in the same way as you would do in traditional information architecture.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Geoffroy. I think we all remember that horrifying story about, machine recognizing photos of different ethnicities and how poorly that thing ended. So, it's not just artificial intelligence. I mean, artificial intelligence is everywhere. And we could debate whether it's actually intelligent or not. But it's also completely different interfaces from the ones that we grew up with, right? At least people in my generation, and possibly yours. So we have autonomous cars, we have conversational interfaces, and these are the hot things that we can see. And of course, Internet of Things, which you mentioned earlier. What is, when you think about the work that you do in your organizations, where do you think we're going to be able to take all these new technology by virtue of organizing information differently? And how do you think what you do is relevant to shaping this kind of future? Now, I'm particularly interested in hearing from Chris, because I see sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I kind of did.
That's all right.
No, I'm seeing, so clearly what we see of the Met is, as you were saying, it's the weather, and it's the what I call the Oracle in my phone, right? But there's so much more. There are drones with sensors going out, and I just guess, I read what's on. But I'm really curious to hear how you think this will evolve beyond what we can see right now.
I mean, I think in the context of weather, I think there's endless possibilities in terms of how people may or may not use weather as an ability to improve their lives in the future and make better decisions. So I can see things, voice interfaces already where people are utilizing conversational interfaces to ask questions, not just about what the weather's going to be, but why is it going to be like that and for how long? So there's those follow-up questions that you wouldn't tend to get when using just a normal user interface on screen. The other thing that potentially around climate control within the homes, particularly as climate change is moving forward. People are more sensitive to reducing their carbon footprint, and therefore utilizing much more smart devices to control heating within their homes, within their vehicles, to reduce the carbon footprint. So therefore they can set targets around what they want to use. I can see a huge amount of benefits over the next sort of 10 years around people integrating smart smartware into their homes more readily, so that they can again use it in a more positive way to affect the future.
Yeah, that's this idea of being able to affect the future is fascinating. I think when I think about the work I do and the work I've done, I think one of the most exciting things about organizing information and structuring it is the fact that it allows you to analyze it, and it allows you to move to the next step. The so what. Now that I know all these things, what can I do with the knowledge I have and the insights I've had? Not that we always get to act on it, but I think that fascinates me. So I'm looking at time, and I really would love to hear from the attendees. We have a HandyDandy Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You have a HandyDandy Q&A button. So if you would like to ask questions of our panelists, please drop them in there, and I'll read them, and I'll make sure that they get answered. One of the things, thinking about the so what, and thinking about, the future of our profession, while our lovely attendees come up with very smart questions or not, it's all good. What is the, thinking both about the future and about the past? I'd really love to hear what the craziest request has you've had when it comes to dealing with information, right? I think information architects are seen as something between scientists and alchemists. Oh, you have the information, you have all the rules, you put it together, make it happen this. So I'd like to hear, what was the most unusual? It doesn't have to be the craziest, and we don't need to name names. And why did you think that was the case?
Who wants to go first?
I was going to say, one of the things that when I started working with Chris and looking at the Met Office, one of the major challenges we had when trying to scan for kind of sentiment and feedback about, the apps, the website, the real estate, all of the organizational stuff that kind of Chris was working on, is huge amounts of data and reviews going, I've got the app, it's raining, it's rubbish. And having to kind of go back to people and say, like, it doesn't control the weather, it will just tell you the weather, was like one of the big kind of like early challenges of that piece of work. But I think one of the things that I get quite a lot, and I'm sure lots of people do, is like, once you understand the information, the architecture, all of these different pieces, you kind of get questions that are like, so how should our business work? And it's sort of like, well, I could tell you how you might organize some of these things, but like, that's maybe a separate question of like how your business should operate is maybe not what this project's looking at. It's kind of more trying to surface what you do. And finding where you draw that line. I mean, I love getting over that line, don't get me wrong, but like, at the appropriate time, I think that's probably the most regular kind of left field request of an information architecture project. Yeah.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Geoffroy, you look like you've got your share.
No, I was thinking, I mean, I was looking for a proper answer to your question. I must say, I've not really have in what I do a really, remarkable question coming from a brand or a customer. What I often have though is the other way around, is brand realizing what the wealth of data that they can get if they engage on conversational interfaces. So usually what our brands do most of the time is just start to open these channels with agents, without AI, just having agents reply. And what they don't realize is that by doing that, they can get to a level of understanding of their business, which is unprecedented, because where they used to have only clicks and path of this customer, navigation path of this customer on their digital assets, so mobile apps or websites, what they get is a huge set of data. We're talking millions of conversations per month with exactly what people are trying to do. And then that's where AI comes in, is that when you put AI on top of that, you can get, visual representation of what people are talking about. And I'd say, it's very interesting in the context of information architecture, because that means you have a chance, to start building that taxonomy and, that basically terminology that you want to use and how you want to present things, but starting from what people really want to do. And that's something which, until AI and these conversational interfaces were in place, was not really possible. You had to kind of guess and test and basically build that model and test it with users. And I would say it's nearly the other way around. Is you start from everything users say, you let the machine build the information architecture, its own internal representation of that, and you can steer it by defining intents, and then you basically validate it on other conversation. But what you're validating is actually not the what people the navigation or how people perceive what you've done. You're validating the understanding that the machine makes of what people say. So again, I think there's very interesting parallel where the problem is the same, the methodology changes.
Yeah. You know what, you're making me think about the movie Her. I don't know if you are familiar with it, and the relationship between all these data points that we collect and all this information that we collect, and the ability to maintain a logical thread. So there is a scene where the artificial intelligence, Samantha, says that she's having about 800 conversations at the same time, all with different facts, different contexts, et cetera, and without an organization. And if you think about Alexa, it's exactly the same thing, just multiply. Or actually, my Alexa just woke up when I said the word.
Yeah, I looked behind me in case mine woke up then as well. We refer to her as Barbara when we're at home, so she doesn't interrupt.
Yes, but so you see, we've got these, kind of like single entity that's able to maintain completely different, separated logical thread just because something is structured in the background. I don't know. I think for me, I'm fascinated about, information worlds and how we draw the connections and how we organize it, and just to create flexibility and scalability. I think that once you have a solid base, you can create modules that you can build on top of. But one of the things that I really love of working with information is that I find that it stimulates my curiosity. And this is the theme of today, isn't it, of World IA Day this year. So as we're nearing the finish line, and I got a question. I got a question precisely around this. How can information architecture and information retrieval and information analysis support human curiosity? How does it help discovery? And how can we be intentional about using information in this way? So as a springboard for activity and investigation, rather than as for agency and investigation, rather than just as a passive recipients of it. And I would like to just like put it to the stage, I would say, normally, if we were in person, and see what you guys think, guys.
So in terms of where for me, curiosity and information architecture are fundamental on both sides, actually. One in how people actually discover information and the curious nature of human beings, but curiosity of human beings, but also at the start of a journey of doing information architecture, I think it's fundamental to be curious and to go to places that you wouldn't necessarily know, and let the evidence, just as Hannah said at the start, let the evidence take you and signpost you to how that architecture and that structure of a site, or in different scenarios, take you to that point and creates that structure through organic means, rather than where we've had in the past, where it's almost dictated. So curiosity fundamentally at the start of the journey of building a great information architecture is fundamental. And then there's building something that allows for curiosity of human beings when they're looking on services. So it's about great signposting. It's about ensuring that you clearly label things in different areas. It's about the you viewed this, you might like this type of stuff that allows for people to go to discover more information. And that's particularly important with the Met Office, because as I said at the start, we've got a huge amount of content, but most people are there for weather and warnings. It's about trying to cross-pollinate those users to other parts of the organization, so that we can get our message out, and particularly around things like climate change, but also around some of the key business areas that we work in aviation, in marine, so that users can find that information if they want to. And I think that there's two sides of that coin that works very well in the Met Office.
So what I'm taking away from this is that the Met Office is the Wikipedia of climate.
we certainly want to have relevant and substantial information about climate change and about how it will affect our weather systems moving forward. Yeah, and we want people to come to us to find that information.
That's very cool.
I can
Bushra,
probably add to that, Alberta. So you're absolutely right, Chris. So curiosity is human nature. It's about being interested and inquisitive about what is and what could be. And how do we translate that into business? How do we support in business terms? So when our stakeholders and users come and ask for something, sometimes they don't even know what they want at the end of the day. So it is even a simple case like a search. So when they come and ask for a simple attribute or information, telling them that, oh, did you actually mean this? We also is connected to these so many other things, and bringing that information back to give them the various options that they probably wouldn't have thought of, and linking those and building that picture so that it opens up possibilities to them they wouldn't have thought of before. I think moving in that direction, how do we do that as an information architect is the key for us to grow and succeed, I suppose, in any organization and to make the business successful here.
Very, very cool.
Albert, it's a slightly different maybe view of this, but I think one thing I was hoping might come up today, and kind of Geoffroy touched on it earlier, is it's the curiosity of people outside of your organization to understand how you're using AI, or how you are using algorithms, or how you are generating suggestions or relationships between pieces of information. And I think that's really, really important right now. And I think it's a task of information architects to find ways of making visible what's inside that black box of AI. Just this week, we've got a new startup that's offering to monitor your kids' Zoom class lessons and give the teachers a good idea of what emotion they're feeling, whether they're engaged, whether they're watching. And that's terrifying, and especially
Yes.
maybe
can they not do that to my son, please?
Yeah. I know. That's that really worries me, because how are they making those decisions? How are they deciding that my child is engaged? What if she's got, which she did the other day, Brooklyn Nine-Nine behind her laptop? She's engaged in that. Are they
Good
monitoring
taste,
that?
though. Really good taste.
It's a great show.
So it's really, really, really important, I think, as information architects, that we find a way of surfacing what happens under that hood. Is this a good algorithm? Is it good enough for people to put their trust in it? And trust and visibility of information is just so important right now. We've got an opportunity to really make this work or really mess this up. And so I hope everyone will kind of take it away with them as is there anything I could do to show, for example, that this interview software, if I have a bookcase behind me, it considers me 20% more employable. That's a statistic that Janelle Shane put out this week on her kind of like neural net blog. And it's crazy that some of this stuff is trash science. It's
nice, Alberta.
Nice.
I think this one makes me
more
look
employable.
smarter.
Definitely more employable now.
Some of this stuff is not much better than astrology, but it's in a algorithm and people trust in it. And I think it's really, really important that we get rid of the trash algorithms and we make really clear where we have good decision making and poor decision making from.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Although I think that astrologists must be the best information architects because they have to keep their predictions organized and make sure.
They've only got 12 categories for everyone.
Yeah. So super conscious of time. I mean, this is a really fun conversation, but there is something that I am curious about because I don't know anybody who woke up as a 6-year-old and decided that they wanted to be an information architect. Other than, well, no, I didn't even know it was a profession, but I did grow up reading the phone book and the yellow pages. So I think that gave me a good idea of categorization. I don't know what was wrong with me. What I'm really curious about is how did this start? What did you Geoffroy, when you, if I can ask, when you were little, what did you want to be? And how did you stumble on information architecture?
So, I mean, if I'm really honest, the first job I wanted to do was, keeping the grass in parks when I was 3 years old. But I had a number of other, very creative ideas. And then for a very long time, I didn't know what to do. And then I basically developed passion for technology. And first, I just wanted to be I was fascinated by mobile. I spent a lot of time on mobile because I was just I finished studies at the time where internet and mobile was starting to come, and I could foresee a lot of impact on society from that part. And right now I'm really much into, how my direction is really, how do exactly what the discussion we were having before. How do you make sure that the changes induced by technology are going to be good for society? Because I mean, in each of these technologies, you see pitfalls coming in, and we had that with the internet, with privacy, security, and so forth. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to go specifically on AI, because I think it's a great opportunity to solve a lot of the issues that humanity is facing right now. But there are a lot of pitfalls along the way. And we are at the stage where exactly what you were mentioning, Hannah, for example, regarding how do you make sure you have good algorithms and that these machines are there for the good of humanity? There are tons of questions now, on ethics. There are a few universities starting to digging on how you implement that, but it's really at the crossing of philosophy, technology, and data science, and it's just fascinating. So these sorts of topics, with some hopefully good things coming out and trying to push in that direction, that's what's drives me.
Yes, no, that's fascinating. But you talked about ethics, and now I want to go. It's another session. Absolutely, I want to talk about ethics and the trolley problem. Give it to an AI. What is it going to do, right? But as I said, that's a completely different session. Bushra, how did you get started?
As an information architect, that's a very good question. So when I started working, I started looking at day-to-day, there were problems which made me think, who's the decision maker here? Who designed this? I'm sure we can improve that. And I started asking and finally found out, actually, there is an area where all the architects sit and do this job. I was like, great. So how do you do it? So I started asking questions and started proposing as well. Maybe we could do something better. And I think it's mainly about, it's a thinking. Architecture is a thinking, I would say, about what is possible and how things can be improved. And it's developing that concept and working with the architects. I realized, okay, this is something I'm really going to enjoy. So move from there, really.
Excellent. So I'm going around my screen. Chris, what did you want to be when you were a kid, and how did you stumble on this?
So I mean, what I wanted to be as a kid was a pilot, but unfortunately, I found out when I was 8 that I was colorblind. So that put pay to that passion. And in terms of, I mean, so you know, I'm not an information architect, and I think it's really important that we push that information architecture is a real skill. There's a talent behind information architecture, to be able to do information architecture really, really well. And I think it's really important that we get that across to everyone and to leaders in businesses. When we're talking about information architecture, it's not something that can be done in the sidelines. It is something that should be concentrated on and should be invested in properly, as any organization should do, so that we structure content from an accessibility perspective through lots of reasons. And so yeah, so I'm not an information architect. User experience is where I kind of fell into. A bit like Geoffroy, I fell in love with technology and digital as a thing at an early age. I've always been an early adopter, and social media and all those sorts of things. So I like to try new things, and I ended up going into this kind of user experience design part of my life for 15 years, and then kind of moved into leading a team of great people that can do some of that stuff and actually do it much better than I can. And I think that's something that's really key for me as someone who has some decision-making power in an organization, that we get the right people to come in and do the work that's required. And it's a burden on us, going back to the trust issue that Hannah mentioned and Geoffroy mentioned. It's a burden on us as leaders to ensure that the stuff that we do is good and it makes sense, and that it allows for people of all shapes and sizes and accessibility needs to find and discover information across our services. And I think that's the most important part for me, is getting the right people to do that job. And it definitely isn't me. There's lots of people much smarter than I am. Most of them are at Nomensa. We're very lucky to work with them. So yeah, that's me.
I think there's still hope for you. Don't worry, Chris.
I don't know. I'm definitely not smart enough. 100%. I'm also really self-aware. I understand my own brain.
Well, we shall see. I think Nomensa will need to invite you back for World IA Day next year. So Hannah, how did that journey go for you?
Yeah, probably not the standard way. So I didn't go in. A lot of people I work with, as Chris says, very, very smart people from maybe academic backgrounds or have studied all of these things, and that's not my route in. I studied fine art. I wanted to go and live in a tree house and paint. So
it looks like you are in a tree house, to be fair. But
yeah,
succeeded.
Hannah, actually, I'm sure that people are just, in keeping with curiosity. I'm sure that people who are attending the panel are really curious about your wall. The wall, it's not a tree house. Your wall doesn't have chicken pox. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So yeah, my husband has been furloughed, and he has built a bouldering wall in our garage, kind of a shed. So it's a bouldering wall. It also fools algorithms. They don't know what to do with it. So it's a bit of camouflage as well. So yeah, I started out in creative arts. That's what I wanted to do, and the more I did it, the more I realized that it was frustrating that I kept doing art, but it wasn't like for anything. And that like, what's it for? Probably was that kind of curiosity that made me move more into digital. Yeah, I've always liked digital computer games, and kind of I used to write terrible programs on an old Sinclair ZX when I was like a kid with my dad and stuff. So moving into digital seems like a good idea. And then, I got into loads and loads of jobs in startups. And when you're in a startup, there's no opportunity to get someone in to do something. You have to kind of like learn as you're going, and you have to like work it out. And I think that's probably where lots of the stuff I did was like, yeah, I worked for kind of 3 or 4 startups from the age of like 21 until quite recently, before I got to kind of Nomensa, and I think that gives you kind of just such a broad experience of all different areas, and kind of I think similar to what Bushra was saying, is that you kind of, as you start building things, you kind of go, who made this decision? I want to make this decision. This was the wrong decision. And as you start crawling your way back through the decision process, quite often this is where you land in the information architecture. So kind of, as I said at the beginning, it's the bit that makes something successful or not successful right at the beginning, and that's kind of where I've crawled up to.
Yes, and I think everything that we've heard today, for me, solidifies the fact is that there is not one way into information architecture, into, you know, supporting worlds that are no longer just physical, and not only digital, and not only virtual or in the cloud or under the sea, et cetera, et cetera. And it's for me, it's been phenomenally interesting to hear from all of you and what information architecture or working around information architecture means. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. The conversation was incredibly valuable, and I hope it was just as valuable for everybody else. I see Henry popping back on the screen to reclaim the reins. So
Awesome. No, I just want to say thanks so much, Hannah, Bushra, Chris, and Geoffroy, and thanks to you, Alberta, for being such a fantastic moderator. Yeah, it's such an interesting discussion, such like diverse viewpoints, and yeah, the perfect way to start today's event. So yeah, thank you to you all, and thanks to everyone that tuned in as well. I think we've got just a bit of time to have a coffee now, and then we're back at 11:30, where we've got 4 lightning talks coming up. From Nomensa's Emily Trotter, Pete Kay, and Will Wellesley Davies, and Sony's Bern Irizarry. So yeah, nice to see so many of you saying hello on the Discord channel and in the chat here as well. So yeah, please continue chatting away. And yeah, we look forward to seeing everyone shortly for some lightning talks. But yeah, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good Saturday and stay curious, right?
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Awesome. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.